Once upon a time, in a vibrant village filled with singing birds and tall dancing trees, there lived a young girl named Aduni. Aduni was a special girl with a big smile and sparkly eyes. She was the only child of a hard-working farming family. Despite their modest means, everyone in the village knew and respected her. They would say, "Look, there goes Aduni, the heart of our village." Aduni's mother and father loved her very much. They had a small house, simple but full of love. Around the house, there were fields where they grew crops, but their land was not the best in the village. The soil was rocky and the yield was often poor. Her father struggled to make ends meet, working tirelessly from dawn till dusk. Her mother, Olabisi, would tend to the house and help in the fields when she could. Despite their struggles, their home was filled with laughter and warmth. Aduni worked as hard as she could to support her family. She would wake up early every morning to help her father in the fields, planting and tending to the crops. When the sun was high and the work was done, she would go to the village square where she taught the village children. Aduni was a gifted teacher, patient and kind, and the children adored her. She taught them to read and write, shared stories, and instilled in them a love for learning. Everywhere Aduni went, she was met with smiles and warm greetings. She was known for her kindness and generosity, always ready to lend a hand to anyone in need. Despite the hardships she faced, Aduni never lost her bright spirit. She was the pride of her parents, Olabisi and Adebayo, and the joy of her brother, Tunde. The villagers admired her resilience and her unwavering commitment to her family and community. As the sun set over the village, casting a warm golden glow on the fields, Aduni's family would gather around the fire, sharing stories and laughter. These were the moments Aduni cherished the most, surrounded by the love and warmth of her family. Little did she know that her life, filled with hard work and quiet contentment, was about to change forever. One morning, Aduni was harvesting the crops, her hands working tirelessly in the rocky soil. As she moved through the fields, her heart sank. So many of the crops were dead or useless, withered by the poor soil and lack of rain. She dropped to her knees, overwhelmed by the sight of their hard work reduced to almost nothing. Tears streamed down her face as she thought about how her family would struggle once more. In the midst of her despair, a gentle breeze rustled the leaves around her, and a shimmering light appeared before her. Aduni looked up to see Osun, the goddess of fertility and prosperity, standing gracefully among the crops. The deity's presence was soothing, her eyes filled with compassion as she gazed at Aduni. "Aduni," Osun said softly, "I have seen your toil and the hardships you and your family endure. Your dedication and hard work have not gone unnoticed." Aduni wiped her tears, staring in awe at the goddess. "Oh, Osun, our land is barren, and no matter how hard we work, the crops always fail. What can we do?" Osun smiled gently. "I am willing to bless your land and make it fertile. I will extend my power to ensure your fields are bountiful. However, this is not without a price. In exchange for my blessing, you must promise to give me 15% of the crop growth as an offering. This must be done each harvest to maintain the fertility of your land. Are you willing to make this promise?" Aduni, filled with hope and desperation, eagerly agreed. "Yes, Osun, I promise to give you 15% of our crop growth every harvest. Thank you for your kindness." With a nod, Osun extended her hand, and a radiant light flowed from her into the fields. The barren land began to transform before Aduni's eyes. The soil turned rich and dark, and the crops started to grow strong and healthy. Aduni's heart swelled with gratitude as she watched the miraculous transformation. Weeks passed, and the harvest time arrived. True to Osun's blessing, the fields were abundant with crops, more than Aduni had ever seen. The family began to give Osun her offering of 15% of the harvest each week, grateful for the prosperity they were enjoying. However, As the money from the harvest and the admiration of the village grew, Aduni's family began to take credit for the bountiful crops. They basked in the praise and admiration of the villagers, who marveled at the family's newfound success. Aduni's father, Adebayo, a proud and hard-working man, began to walk with a new sense of pride. He had always been respected for his wisdom and dedication to his family, but now he was praised for his agricultural genius. Adebayo loved his daughter dearly, but started to believe that the newfound success was a result of his own hard work and leadership. Her mother, Olabisi, wise and loving, had always been the pillar of the family. She was gentle and kind, and her warmth radiated through their home. However, Olabisi too began to enjoy the comforts that came with their prosperity. She started to accept the villagers' compliments, believing that their hard work had finally paid off. Aduni's younger brother, Tunde, was a bright and curious boy. He idolized his sister and loved helping her in the fields and learning from her teachings. With the villagers' admiration and the wealth flowing in, Tunde began to dream of a future filled with endless possibilities, forgetting the humble beginnings they came from. Aduni tried to remind her family that it was Osun's work that had blessed their land, not their own efforts. This prosperity is because of Osun's blessing, she would say. We must remember to give her the offering we promised. But the allure of wealth and the villagers' admiration had gone to their heads. Her family dismissed her concerns, convinced that their hard work alone was responsible for the bounty. Aduni continued to teach the village children about Osun, trying to instill in them the importance of gratitude and humility. She shared stories of the goddess and emphasized the significance of keeping promises. But even the children, now enjoying the luxuries and riches from the abundant harvests, began to forget Osun's role in their prosperity. They were too dazzled by the newfound wealth and the ease it brought to their lives. Eventually, a crisis struck. The villagers, eager to sell as much of their harvest as possible to capitalize on the high prices at the market, sold all the crops without setting aside the 15% offering for Osun. They were caught up in the excitement and profits, and Aduni's warnings were ignored. When Aduni realized what had happened, it was too late. There was nothing left to offer to Osun. That night, Osun appeared before Aduni once more, her eyes filled with anger and disappointment. "You have broken your promise," she said, her voice resonating with power. "You and your family have taken credit for my blessings and neglected the offering you vowed to give. You lied to me, and now you shall be cursed to lie forever." Aduni woke up in a cold sweat, her heart heavy with dread. She sat up in bed, realizing it was a dream. She hoped it was just a nightmare, but the feeling of dread lingered. Determined to shake it off, she went about her day tending to the harvest. As she walked out to the fields, her heart sank. The lush, bountiful crops that had flourished under Osun's blessing were now barren and lifeless. The soil was dry and cracked, and the plants were withered and dead. Aduni's mind raced. Was that dream real? She wondered, her heart pounding in her chest. The realization struck her with a force that left her breathless. Osun's curse was real, and the land was now reflecting the broken promise. Aduni's heart pounded as she stood in the barren fields. The reality of Osun's curse weighed heavily on her. She hurried back to the village, her mind racing with worry and fear. She needed to warn her family and the villagers about the curse and the dire consequences they faced. When she reached home, she found her father, Adebayo, her mother, Olabisi, and her brother Tunde gathered around the breakfast table, chatting happily. Their cheerful faces quickly turned to excitement when they heard Aduni's news. "Aduni, what's wrong?" Olabisi asked, her voice filled with worry. Aduni took a deep breath, trying to steady her trembling voice. "The harvest is gone. We have nothing," she said, but her voice betrayed her, and it came out as, "Everything is fine. The fields are so bountiful this harvest. Her family's faces lit up with excitement. Adebayo smiled broadly. Oh wow, I cannot wait. There are these jewels at the market we've been wanting to buy. Olabisi clapped her hands in delight. Yes, and we can finally get those fine clothes we've been admiring. Tunde, eyes wide with excitement, added, and we can get more tools for the farm and even spoil ourselves a little for all our hard work. Aduni tried to correct them. No, you can't. The harvest is gone. We need to save what money we have left. But what came out was, yes, we should buy them, and since this harvest is so bountiful, we should get even more and spoil ourselves for the hard work. Helpless, Aduni watched as her family prepared to go to the market. Every time she tried to scream, "No, stop," words of encouragement came out instead. When she wanted to stop speaking, the curse made her say something. The family went to the market and purchased everything they desired: jewels, clothes, and tools. The bustling market was alive with the sounds of merchants calling out their wares, children laughing, and music playing. The stalls were filled with colorful fabrics, glittering jewelry, and a variety of goods from near and far. Aduni's family moved from stall to stall, their arms filling with their newfound treasures. Adebayo haggled with a jeweler for a beautiful necklace, while Olabisi admired a boat of rich, colorful fabric. Tunde excitedly picked out new farming tools, each one promising to make their work easier and more efficient. As Aduni wandered through the market, she was approached by several men who found her beauty captivating. One particularly unattractive man, with missing teeth and an unkempt beard, walked up to her and smiled. "Hello, beautiful. Would you like to walk with me for a while?" Aduni, repulsed by the man's appearance, wanted to say no, but the curse forced her to smile and reply, "Of course, I would love to. You are very handsome." The man beamed at her response, taking her arm and leading her around the market. Aduni felt a wave of frustration and helplessness wash over her as the man continued to talk about himself, clearly pleased by her false compliments. Her heart sank further when another unattractive man approached, eager to win her favor with poorly told jokes and boastful stories. Despite her internal turmoil, every word that left her mouth was a lie. She praised the men's appearances and pretended to be enthralled by their stories. The curse made it impossible for her to reject their advances or tell them how she truly felt. Finally, the men left, satisfied with their encounters, and Aduni was able to return to her family. The weight of the curse felt heavier than ever as she watched her family continue to spend their money on luxurious items, oblivious to the devastation that awaited them back home. The family returned home, laden with their new possessions, filled with joy and anticipation. Aduni's heart sank as she realized the full extent of her helplessness. The next morning, her family, eager to see the bountiful harvest once again, followed Aduni to the fields. When they saw the devastation, their expressions turned from excitement to shock and disbelief. The once flourishing fields were now a wasteland. Aduni's family felt a sudden wave of despair. "Where is the harvest, Aduni?" they asked eagerly. Aduni tried to tell them the truth. "The harvest is gone. Osun has abandoned us." But what came out was, "I have hidden the harvest." Her family's despair quickly turned to relief, but frustration. "Aduni, this is serious," Adebayo said sternly. "We and the village need this harvest while the price of crops is high." Aduni tried again to explain. "We must save what money we have left." But instead she said, "Yes, we should buy more and spoil ourselves." Olabisi's eyes filled with frustration. "Aduni, where is the harvest? We trusted you." Tunde looked at her with disbelief. "Is this some kind of game to you, Aduni? We spent everything on those things at the market?" Her family kept asking her where the harvest was, but she couldn't give an accurate answer. Each response was different and a lie. Their frustration turned to anger. Adebayo's face hardened as he turned away from Aduni. Olabisi's eyes filled with tears. and Tunde, feeling betrayed and confused, clenched his fists in silent rage. The family went home, arguing fiercely. Voices echoed through the house as accusations and misunderstandings flew. The once harmonious home was now filled with discord and mistrust. In the midst of the chaos, they decided to lock Aduni in her room, hoping to figure out what to do next. Aduni sat in her room, feeling utterly helpless and isolated. She knew the curse had not only destroyed their harvest, but also shattered the trust and unity of her family. She needed to find a way to break the curse and restore her relationships with her family and the village. Aduni sat in her room, her heart heavy with the weight of the curse. Locked away and isolated, she felt the pain of her family's anger and distrust. The night was long and sleepless, her mind racing with thoughts of how to lift the curse and restore her family's harmony. As dawn approached, there was a sudden commotion outside the house. Several villagers had come, their faces filled with concern and frustration. They knocked on the door, demanding to speak with Aduni's family. Adebayo opened the door, his face weary. "What is it?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "We were expecting the harvest," one villager said urgently. "We need to know where it is. Our livelihoods depend on it." Adebayo sighed deeply, glancing back at Olabisi and Tunde. "Aduni, she hid the harvest and won't tell us where it is," he admitted reluctantly. The villagers' expressions turned from concern to fury. "We must know," another villager shouted. "Bring her to the village square for a meeting. The pressure of all our livelihoods will get her to tell the truth." Olabisi and Tunde exchanged worried glances, but knew they had no choice. The tension in the air was palpable as Adebayo went to Aduni's room and unlocked the door. "Come with me," he said sternly. Aduni, feeling a mix of fear and determination, followed her father to the village square. The early morning light cast long shadows, and the square was already filling with anxious villagers. As they approached, Aduni could hear the murmur of the crowd growing louder. The villagers surrounded her, their eyes filled with desperation and anger. "Where is the harvest, Aduni?" they demanded in unison. Aduni tried to explain. "I have been cursed by Osun. It's your fault. Your actions have caused her to curse and abandon us for your envy and unfaithfulness." But the curse twisted her words, and what came out was, "Osun has blessed me further and provided a more bountiful harvest. I had to take even more." The villagers' frustration turned to rage. "This is serious, Aduni," one elder said. "We need this harvest while the price of crops is high." Her family, hearing that the harvest was supposedly even bigger, chimed in as well. "Aduni, where is the harvest? We trusted you," one shouted. Another villager, with a stern expression, added, "Is this some kind of game to you, Aduni? We spent everything preparing for this harvest." The villagers began to murmur angrily among themselves, each chiming in with what they should do to figure out where the harvest was. The crowd's anger and desperation reached a boiling point. Voices echoed through the village square as accusations and misunderstandings flew. The once harmonious community was now filled with discord and mistrust. The villagers, feeling betrayed, demanded a solution. "We can't let this go on," one villager said firmly. "We need to take action." Amidst the chaos, all Aduni could do was cry, her tears flowing freely as she realized she couldn't speak her truth. Her family and the villagers, driven by frustration and desperation, decided to lock her in a storeroom near the village square, hoping that the pressure would force her to reveal the truth. Aduni sat in the dimly lit room, feeling utterly helpless and isolated. She knew the curse had not only destroyed their harvest, but also shattered the trust and unity of her family and the village. She needed to find a way to break the curse and restore her relationships with her family and the village. Locked in the storeroom, Aduni could hear the villagers outside, their voices a mix of anger and desperation. They gathered in small groups, discussing what to do next. Some suggested torturing her, others proposed turning the entire house upside down, and a few even mentioned selling her belongings to pressure her into revealing the truth. "We need to do something drastic," one villager said. "Let's sell all her belongings. That should make her talk." Another villager nodded. "Yes, sell everything she has. Maybe then she'll realize we're serious." The villagers agreed on the plan and marched to the storeroom where Aduni was confined. They flung the door open, their faces filled with determination. "We're going to sell all your belongings, Aduni," one of them announced. "Maybe then you'll tell us where the harvest is." Aduni, filled with panic, tried to protest. "No, you can't. I've had those since I was a child." But the curse twisted her words, and what came out was, "Yes, sell everything. The harvest is worth 10 times as much." The villager's eyes widened in fury. "So, you're hiding even more than we thought," one shouted. Ignoring her cries, the villagers proceeded to gather all of Aduni's belongings. They sold her cherished possessions, from childhood toys to precious mementos, hoping the loss would compel her to reveal the harvest's location. When they returned, their faces were set in grim lines. "Now, tell us where the harvest is," one demanded. But Aduni, still under the curse, could only spew more lies. "I hid it where you'll never find it," she said, though she desperately wanted to tell the truth. The villagers, now at the end of their patience, angrily pulled her out of the storeroom. "If we have no food, then neither will you," they said harshly. They dragged her to a sturdy table in the village square and tied her down. The entire village gathered to watch, their faces filled with a mix of curiosity, anger, and concern. The elders stood at the front, their expressions stern and unyielding. Children clung to their parents, whispering and pointing at Aduni, while the adults murmured amongst themselves, debating whether this drastic action would finally yield the truth. "Aduni," one of the elders said, stepping forward, "you have brought this upon yourself. We need the harvest to survive. If you do not tell us where it is, you will suffer the consequences." Aduni, tears streaming down her face, tried to plead with them. "Please, I have been cursed by Osun. It's not my fault." But the curse twisted her words again, and what came out was, "I took the harvest and hid it for myself. It's all mine." The villagers gasped in disbelief and anger. "How could you be so selfish?" one woman shouted. "We trusted you." Another villager, shaking his head in frustration, said, "You'll stay here until you tell us where the harvest is, and you'll starve until you do." The crowd watched as the ropes were tightened around Aduni's wrists and ankles, securing her to the table. Her family stood nearby, their faces etched with a mix of sorrow and helplessness. Olabisi's eyes were red from crying, while Adebayo's jaw was set in a hard line, his pride wounded deeply. Tunde, his face pale and drawn, could only stare in disbelief at his sister's predicament. As the days passed, Aduni grew weaker. The villagers continued to search desperately for the hidden harvest, overturning every stone and searching every corner, but to no avail. Her cries for help, distorted by the curse, only fueled their anger and desperation. Aduni's family, filled with a mix of anger and helplessness, watched as she withered away. Olabisi cried every night, torn between her love for her daughter and the desperate need for the harvest. Adebayo's pride was shattered, and he felt a deep sense of failure. Tunde, unable to comprehend the situation, could only look on in despair. As the days dragged on, the villagers began to doubt if Aduni would ever tell them where she had hidden the harvest. Their initial fury turned to desperation. They tore through every corner of the village, ripping up floorboards, digging through fields, and turning over every stone in their frantic search. But no matter how hard they looked, they found nothing. The whispers of doubt grew louder. "What if she never tells us?" one villager asked, his voice filled with fear. "We can't survive without the harvest," another replied, her eyes wide with worry. "We've sold everything we had." Aduni, growing weaker by the day, lay tied to the table in the village square. Her once vibrant spirit was now a shadow of its former self. Her eyes, which had once sparkled with life, were now dull and lifeless. She tried to tell the villagers the truth, to plead with them to understand, but the curse twisted her words into more lies. The villagers, seeing her deteriorate, began to panic. "We can't let her die," Olabisi cried. her voice breaking with sorrow. She's our only hope. Adebayo, his face lined with worry, looked at his daughter with helpless anger. We need to do something. If she dies, we'll never find the harvest. Tunde, standing silently by, could only nod in agreement. The weight of their situation pressed heavily on them all. As Aduni's condition worsened, the villagers' desperation reached its peak. They tried to force feed her, hoping to keep her alive long enough to get the truth, but her body was too weak to accept any nourishment. They brought the village healer, who shook his head sadly after examining her. There is nothing I can do, he said softly. She is too far gone. Realizing the severity of the situation, the villagers finally understood the gravity of what they had done. Their anger and desperation had driven them to a point of no return, and now they faced the consequences of their actions. In her final moments, Aduni managed to whisper through the curse, "Forgive me." But what came out was, "I deceived you all." With those words, Aduni took her last breath. The village fell silent, the weight of their collective guilt settling over them like a heavy shroud. They had lost their only hope, and the realization hit them like a physical blow. The villagers gathered around her lifeless body, their faces etched with grief and regret. Olabisi collapsed to her knees, wailing in sorrow, while Adebayo stood in stunned silence, his eyes brimming with tears. Tunde, feeling the loss deeply, knelt beside his sister, his heart breaking with every passing moment. In the days that followed, the village was plunged into mourning. They had not only lost Aduni, but also their last chance at survival. The fields remained barren, and their once vibrant community was now a shadow of its former self. The village elders called for a meeting, hoping to find a way to move forward. "We must come together," one elder said. "We have made terrible mistakes, and now we must find a way to atone." The villagers nodded in agreement, their faces solemn. They knew they had to find a way to rebuild, to survive, despite the odds stacked against them. As they began to salvage what little they had left, they discovered something they had overlooked. In a small, hidden compartment in Aduni's room, they found a note she had written before the curse took full effect. The note explained everything: the curse, her attempts to tell the truth, and her love for her family and village. Reading the note, the villagers were filled with a profound sense of sorrow and shame. They had misunderstood and mistreated Aduni, and now it was too late to make amends. The note revealed that Aduni had never hidden the harvest. It had simply withered away due to their neglect of Osun's offerings. The village was left to face the harsh reality of their actions. They had lost everything because of their greed and lack of faith. With heavy hearts, they began to rebuild, vowing never to let such a tragedy befall them again. In the end, Aduni's story became a somber lesson for generations to come. The villagers remembered her not as a deceiver, but as a victim of their own failings. Her name was spoken with reverence and regret, a reminder of the importance of faith, trust, and the consequences of broken promises. As the villagers continued their efforts to rebuild, a strange, eerie whisper began to circulate through the village. It was a low, deep voice, almost as if carried by the wind. Some claimed it was Osun herself, while others believed it to be the spirit of Aduni. One night, as the moon shone brightly over the silent village, the villagers finally reaped the consequences of their actions. Thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe for more enchanting tales. Goodbye.